Welcome once again. This is Pinnacle Professional College, and today we'll be continuing our lecture on agency theory. And we'll be talking extensively about corporate governance, and one of the key issues around corporate governance is the agency theory. So it's important to understand that. We talked about the different ways of reducing the agency problem, etc. So today, let's dive into some extra methods of reducing the agency problem. A different method of reducing the agency problem is to make the board of directors more effective at monitoring. Right? One of the things we mentioned is that board of directors have to monitor. They have to monitor the decisions of executive management. So a different method of reducing the agency problem is to make the board of directors more effective at monitoring the decisions of executive management. A board, for instance, will be ineffective at monitoring the decisions of management if it's dominated by the chief executive officer. All right. If the CEO is the dominant figure on the board, it will be ineffective at monitoring it. Now, why is this? The chief executive officer is an executive officer. He or she is part of the executive management. If he is on the board, then and he's dominant, then monitoring will be ineffective, especially if the chief executive officer is doing something that is not in the interest of shareholders and they are on the board and he or she is on the board. He or she will be silent on those issues. So if the CEO is on the board and is a dominant figure on the board, monitoring will be ineffective. This is because the CEO is the head of the executive management team. The board will be especially ineffective in a monitoring role if the CEO is also the chairman of the board. It's also the chairman of the board. Farmer and Jensen in 1983 argued that an ineffective board must consist largely of independent, non-executive directors. For a board to be effective, Farmer and Jensen argued that it should consist largely of independent, non-executive directors. Non-executive directors are those directors who are not involved in the day-to-day stuff, the business operations of the company. Independent, non-executive directors have no executive role in the company and are not full-time employees. They are not full-time employees. And they are able to act better in the best interest of the shareholders. Independent non-executive directors should also take the decisions where there is a conflict of interest between executive directors and the best interest of the company. For example, non-executive directors or NEDs should be responsible for the remuneration packages for executive directors and other senior managers. Very, very important. Very, very important. Now let's move on to the accountability of agents. The accountability of agents. Agents should be accountable to their principal for their decisions and actions. Agents should be accountable to their principal for their decisions and actions. Accountability means reporting back to the principal and giving account of what has been achieved. Also, answering questions from the principal about the performance. And also, the principal having the power to reward or punish the agent for good or bad performance. So accountability means three things. Number one, reporting to the principal. Number two, answering questions from the principal. Number three, the principal putting out rewards or punishment depending on the performance of the agent. Greater accountability should reduce the agency problem. If there's greater accountability, it should reduce the agency problem because basically provides management with a greater incentive to achieve performance levels that are in the best interest of the shareholders. If there's greater accountability, it sort of pushes management to align their interests with the interest of shareholders. This is very, very important. Very, very important. Now let's move on to ethics and the agency theory. The agency theory may be summarized as follows. In many companies, especially in large companies, there's a separation of ownership from control. Professional managers are appointed to act in the best interest of the company. Individuals, as we all know, we as human beings are driven by self-interest. We seek our own interest first. Conflict of self-interest arise between shareholders and managers. Because managers are driven by self-interest, they most of the time cannot be relied upon to act in the best interest of the shareholders. And this is what creates the agency problem. The agency problem also creates costs for the shareholders because the shareholders have to minimize this agency problem. They incur monitoring costs, bonding costs, and residual losses. The aim should be to minimize these costs by improving the monitoring of management and providing management with incentives that bring their interests closer to those of the shareholders. So what we are trying to achieve here is to try and bring the interest of the managers very close to that of shareholders. Concepts of agency theory are now applied in various codes of corporate governance in many different countries. Now, when we began this topic, I mentioned ethics and agency theory. There's an ethical aspect to agency theory. The theory is based on the view that individuals cannot be trusted to act in any way that is not in their own best interest. Individuals cannot be trusted to act in a way that is not in their own interest, right? Individuals cannot be trusted. Now let's look at agency conflicts or agency relationships in other types of organizations. Agency conflicts, let's look at the agency relationship in the public sector. Managers are also agents acting for principals in public sector organizations. So once again, there's potential for agency conflicts. So the principal, when it comes to a public sector organization, the principal here are the taxpayer and the electorate. And they are more interested in value for money. There are whole issues around appropriately assessing value for money. The principals are a heterogeneous group consisting of a large number of individuals, because the electorate consists of a diverse group of people. The group might not agree what actually constitutes value for money, or even if the service is required at all. The government must therefore make political decisions as to how public money should be spent in a way that they best believe is good for the country. In a democracy, citizens have the opportunity to vote against the government if they deem their performance unsatisfactory. Right, so very, very important to note. In a public organization, which is an organization that exists to serve some government policy or to fulfill some social need, like education, healthcare, etc., the principal is the taxpayer and the electorate, right? And the principal, which is the taxpayer, they have handed over management of the public sector organization to the government body to run it effectively on their behalf. And sometimes, the government bodies do not act in the best interest of the taxpayer, right? They become corrupt and do not act in the best interest of the taxpayer. Another problem in the governance of public sector organizations is how to establish strategic objectives and then monitor the success of public sector organizations in achieving these. Very, very important concept. Very, very important concept. So So we see agency conflicts in public sector organizations. We see agency conflicts also in charities as well. Managers are also agents acting for principals in charities. So once again, there's a potential for agency conflicts. So charities will get money from the public through donations. That's how they raise revenue. So the donors here are the principals. And a key governance issue that needs to be discussed here is whether the donations are used for the intended purposes or they are wasted, misused, or embezzled. It's very, very important. So for a charity, what are the ways to reduce the agency problem? A key solution is that the charity can be run by a board of directors overseen by a committee of trustees. And these trustees are sometimes called governors. They are sometimes called governors. In this case, the board manages the charity and the trustees act as a monitor or control on the board to ensure that the board is delivering value to the donors. So that's one. The first thing is a committee of trustees. Second is complete financial disclosure. And third is related to audits, a requirement for the audit of the financials of the charity. This is where we'll bring our lecture to an end for today. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so. Share this video with others and have a good day. Bye-bye.